And finally, this is the biggest gravestone in the graveyard, and this is the man. This is the man who should have been mayor. This is Lewis Harris. He was born Samuel Wernsack in Germany, and he came here in the 1830s. He started selling clothes. He was living with a guy who was a watchmaker, and through that he got interested in jewellery, and then he goes into a partnership with a Swiss guy called Veal. They set up a jewellery business down Suffolk Street, and then one morning the apprentice comes in to open up the shop, and half the watches in the window are gone, and when he goes looking for Veal to tell him, Veal's gone too with £800. And they then find that basically Veal is going bankrupt personally, and he's skedaddled with all the money and the watches. So he goes round to the police station, and somehow or other he manages to persuade them to give him a warrant, because he's not entitled to a warrant, and they go after him and they bring him back. But when they bring him to court, they find is, well, the £800 was a loan from Veal's uncle, so he hasn't really stolen that, and it's kind of his money. And well, he's a co-owner of the business, so you can kind of say that. So basically, Veal trots off, and he's left there hanging with all the debts, and it goes bankrupt. And that's kind of really important, because in later life he's going to become what we would now call a receiver, right? But he goes through that process of going bankrupt and coming out the other side of it, right? And then he goes from being a jeweller into bill brokering, which basically means if you were buying something, you would give somebody a bill of exchange which says you're going to pay them in so much time, X amount of money, and then if they're stuck for cash, they would sell it to somebody for less than face value, and then they can either hang on to it until it's due up, or they might try and sell it on and just make less money. And he gets very good at this. And then from that he goes on, and he's a big success story. But in the back of his mind is the fact that he went through the bankruptcy process. And then and so suddenly he's been brought in as receiver, and apparently he was very, very good, because unlike other people who just go, yeah, well, we're taking everything, he would try and find a way out for people. And he's very popular, he's very well liked, and then he's very involved with the Home Rule movement, and then the Liberals asked him to go up as an alderman for the South Dock Ward in Dublin Corporation. And almost immediately, and probably for the first time since he's been in Dublin, a whole anti-Semitic smear campaign starts up. Right? And he writes this extraordinary letter to the papers in which he says it's the first time he's really encountered this, and he doesn't see why it should be brought up. He feels he's always been very fair to people, and all he really wants to do is to give something back to the community. And he throws himself at the hands of the people of Dublin, and he completely trashes the other guy at the polls 2-1. And he's elected alderman. And now, what may have also helped was, he did say he was going to ensure that there was no excessive taxes, such as rate increases that weren't needed. He was going to work on the water system, and he worked very, very closely with Sir John Gray on the Varsity water system. And the other thing was, he was going to clean up the city. And you're all thinking, yeah, corruption? No, he was literally going to clean up the city and cleansing agent. The only people who really disliked him were South City Council, because he was always down their back. But at the time that he went up, he was very ill, and his doctors had said to him he should get out of the country. But he thought being the first Irish Jew to go into politics was such an honour that he had to do it. And then he's asked if he wants to become mayor, and he can't refuse that. And he does, and the anxiety that he gets speeds up the illness that he has, and so he dies just before he's about to become mayor of the city. And because that leaves a vacuum, we get the first of only 3 unionist mayors in the history of the city. But it also leaves a vacuum in the South Dock Ward, and so his son Alfred is approached to go up. It's a much tighter election this time. He gets in by the skin of his teeth. But you'll be glad to hear he only had to poll 131 votes. And he's back on the same agenda as the father. Right? But in 1885, he's involved in an incident in the theatre. And it's really just handbags. He thinks a woman's been badly treated, and a few fists fly between him and another guy. And it's forgotten the next day, but it makes the papers in London. Right? And it comes to the attention of a guy called Labouchere, Henry Labouchere. And he's editor of a magazine called The Truth, right? Which would be the equivalent, I'd say, The Sun today. Right? They do a certain amount of exposés that are quite good detective work, but by and large, it's just slander. And he's so rich, he doesn't mind it. And his editor said that at the time that he was editor of the magazine, they had 2 drawers on his table, one for correspondence and one for incoming libel actions. So he does a story about money lending, and he accuses this man's son of being a money lender. Right. Now, he calls him a usurer. Now, Alfred Harris had never made any bones about the fact that one of the things that he did was he lent money. But to call him a usurer was something totally different, because that's extortion. And then he follows it up with a piece where he directly goes for Alfred Womander Harris, in which he claims he's cheating people, he's doing little old ladies out of their inheritance, he's cheating children out of their inheritance and things like this. And so he sues. Now the thing about Labouchere is, Labouchere, he hated Jews. He absolutely hated them. Right? He was deeply anti-Semitic. He hated the suffragette movement. Right? And politically he's best remembered for the Labouchere Act, which was the amendment, the Labouchere Amendment, which was the amendment that made it a criminal act for men to engage in homosexual activity, which is the one that brought them off the road. So Alfred decides to sue him. Right. Now, the opening of the trial has to be delayed because Labouchere is involved in the duel, so he misses the boat. But one of the extraordinary things that Alfred does is he doesn't just sue the magazine and Labouchere, he sues the distributors, who are W.H. Smiths. This has never been done before. Right. And they have to have a whole day's hearing to figure out, can it be done? Now what Labouchere has done, he's brought in, he's got Timothy Healy, who, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him, he was a politician, but he was also would have been the top barrister in Dublin. He also has the Attorney General, and he has the Solicitor General, and that's his team. Right? So he's got money to spend, you know. So they have this bizarre situation at the first day of the trial where they haul in the manager of W.H. Smith's, right? And they question him, and what they basically prove is magazines arrived in a brown paper parcel. They then cut the brown paper parcel open, they took the magazines out, they then mixed them up with other magazines, because W.H. Smith owned a huge amount of shops in Ireland, right? And they had outlets in all the railway stations, which was massive distribution around the country. And so they made all these parcels up, including The Truth, which then was sent around the country, right? And the manager of W.H. Smith in Dublin holds his hand up and says, yes, I actually not just saw it, I helped do it. Right. So they get the go-ahead that they can sue Labouchere and they can sue W.H. Smith. Now what Labouchere normally did in a libel action was he'd go, well, you can't afford to sue me, so I'll stretch it out. So this is why he has a high-powered team. And he's going, because he's after a man over money, he's going to really stretch it out. But Alfred can afford it. Right? So what they do is they go for a bill of discovery, which basically says, we want to see all your books. Right? And of course he's going, you're not going to see all my books. So it stretches out for about 4 months with nothing actually happening. And then finally they're forced to settle, and Alfred wins his case. in 1886. But the really interesting knock-on of that is, right, when W.H. Smiths are reeling from what's happened, and they're thinking, what sort of country is Ireland? Because this is really significant. It's getting sued for just distributing the magazine. And even worse, losing the case. And then the manager turns up in London and he goes, how would you fancy management dollars? And they're going, take it. And his name is Charles Easons.
Jesus Christ, gas, isn't it?
So,
Incredible.
you know,
Yeah.
so they're just some of the people who were here.
They're relations, are they, obviously?
But they are
It's a
most,
brother
down
and
here.
his wife.
There's a lot of Harrises who are the children of.
When was the last
burial?
burial?
The last official burial was about 1902.
1902.
But then there were people, while it was still a cemetery, there were burials in the 1930s, right? Of people who had a kind of family plot or things like that.
And how many are buried? Do you know?
Nobody knows.
I don't know. Even though
You
there's
see, so many.
one
There's 148 tombstones, and then there's 80 people buried this way.
yeah.
But there's a whole period that there's no account for.
Yeah.
And then there's the
That's so-
18th century as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, there could be another 100.
You just don't know.
But
yeah.
the one thing I didn't mention, and I probably should have, was I mentioned the two boys who sorted out Solomon Stavenhager up there. And I just mentioned them because they're buried along this path here.
Yeah.
Right. Their name was Ephraim and Gobert Bloom. B-L-U-M. Right. Now, they also used Robert and Joseph Bloom. Right. Now, Joseph's son was Mark Bloom, and he changes the name to B-L-O-O-M. Right. He's a dentist, and he's one of the 5 dentists who started the Dublin Dental Hospital. His son, who becomes a Catholic, right, is also a dentist, and he turns up in 6 chapters of Ulysses, and one of which the question I've asked is he Leopold's cousin? And the reply is no, and they then give a biography of Leopold Bloom, and the biography of Leopold Bloom is the biography of Ephraim and Gobert Bloom.
Right.
Exactly.
So
So it's just one. There's a lot of. There's also like there's another family buried here. There's a guy called Chaim Marx, and he's not related to Spencer, but he is related to the other family. And there's a lot of little quirky connections.
a
like
lot of
that
very wealthy.
around the place. But there's a lot of poor people as well.
Yeah, I suppose
you know what
one
I mean?
evens out the other, yeah.
Like the gravestones would have been wealthy, but when you go through it, I mean, the tallest gravestone over there, to a guy called Maurice de Groot, he's Dutch. He started off in the South Dublin Union. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And worked his way up from there.
yeah.
And at one stage he was supplying Cork 30 million bottles a year. You know, they're the kind of... There is a lot of stories like that are really interesting, and a lot of these people are doing it in that period after the famine, which is really, really interesting because you get a slightly different picture of how business works.
Yeah.
And they weren't particularly doing a Jewish thing because there were lots of people who weren't Jewish were doing the same thing. Because you don't have that kind of focus group that you have in a location like this, right?
Yeah,
You don't really think so much about what was happening. But when you see the stories of the people here,
It's amazing.
there is a whole other thing going on. You know?
Amazing.
Yeah.